Hi everyone, Kristen McDonald, registered dietitian, back to prepare for you tonight one of my favorite recipes, especially this time of year. It's a red cabbage, apple, cranberry coleslaw, and I tried this the first time in my freshman nutrition class. They had a potluck dinner and one of the TAs brought this, and it's been a favorite recipe that I brought back to my family, have shared with them, have made for many cooking demonstrations, for friends, different events. So I do hope you will try it and love it. It's colorful and bright and just highlights produce this time of year. It's excellent. And it has some fruit in there too, which is something, even if my kids won't eat the red cabbage, sometimes I can get them to eat some of the apple or the cranberry that's in there, or even the nuts, and it just exposes them to a variety of foods that they wouldn't normally see on our dinner table. One of the things I have found at my local grocery store is these bags of pre-cut red cabbage, and it is a lifesaver. I have just opened 2 bags and put them right here in my salad bowl. I think in my braised red cabbage recipe a few months ago, I showed you how to cut up a head of cabbage, and that was red cabbage as well, but you could cut up a green cabbage the same way. It's a little tedious, but it's easy to do. So you can either pick convenient, which usually costs just a little bit more, or you can pick the one that's a little bit more labor intensive, but you can save yourself a little bit of money. So it's nice to have that option at the grocery store. Then I have a Granny Smith apple. These apples are tart. They're a little bit less sweet than some of the redder apples you see, or other apples I've highlighted in recipes like Fuji apples or Gala apples. And it adds a great crunch and contrasting color to this salad. So usually I like to use this large knife, but a small paring knife works well for an apple also. I usually start by cutting it in half and then into quarters. I take the middle section out with a couple slices like that, and I'm not peeling the apples. Certainly if you have eaters who are a little bit pickier in your family and you think they might like the salad better with a peeled apple, you could certainly try that. There's a lot of great fiber in the skin of the apple though, so that's part of why I like to leave it on, and that beautiful contrasting green color that I mentioned. So I'm going to try to make thin slices just because it makes it a little bit easier to grab a bite of apple when you're eating the salad. And you notice like my pieces in half here, and that's fine. Sometimes I will actually cut it in half, especially if it does it on its own, to make smaller pieces. It doesn't have to be perfect. And this is something that older kids who can maybe work with a slightly sharper knife can help with, because apple is a little bit harder to cut up than some of the other produce, like I've shown you with those plastic knives my kids have. All right, so I'm gonna do this. If you like more apple in your salad, I think there are times where I've made this with 2 Granny Smith apples, so you could certainly add a little bit more. All right, just 2 pieces left here. But there's certainly less cutting when I only have to cut up an apple instead of cutting up that whole head of cabbage also. And don't let the cabbage fool you. I usually pick the smallest one I can find, because when you slice it up and you kind of feather it into all of these slaw pieces, a small cabbage really turns into a large volume for salad. All right, last slices here. All right, so there's my apple. The next ingredient I'm going to add is my chopped pecans, or pecans, however you choose to say it. I've learned that that's a regional difference. So maybe in North Carolina, it's pecans? I don't know. This is something my husband and I have debated. But I typically say pecans. So this is a 1/4 cup. I'm gonna just toss them in. The original recipe calls to toast them, and I've actually never done that. I feel like it's an unnecessary step. Toasting a nut will bring out its flavor a little bit more, but I think they are just fine coming out of the bag, and I chop them up or even just break them up with my fingers a little bit, and it's eliminating a step that's not needed. Then double the amount of craisins to pecans. So 1/4 cup of pecans, a 1/2 cup of craisins or dried cranberries, and I have started selecting the craisins that are labeled reduced sugar. They make a variety. So dried cranberries do have a little bit of sugar added to them for sweetness. And just to cut back on unnecessary sugars, I choose the one that's labeled lower sugar or reduced sugar. And you especially should do that because we actually add a little bit of sugar to the dressing, so there's no reason to add sweetness with the craisins. You can control the amount of sugar you add to the dressing. I have 3/4 of a cup, no, 1/3 of a cup, sorry, had to look at my measuring cup there, of rice wine vinegar or rice vinegar. You can buy a seasoned variety or an unseasoned variety. Typically, I like to work with the unseasoned variety for the same reason that I just talked about eliminating that unnecessary sugar from the craisins. Because what's added to it is sugar and salt. And so if I can control how much sugar and salt I like to add, I think that's better because you can control the flavor of your salad. But this is what I had to work with tonight, so I'm actually just going to skip adding any salt from the shaker, and I'm going to add a smaller amount of sugar. The recipe normally calls for 3 tablespoons, and I'm going to add just 1 tonight, just because I've worked with this product in the past, and I know that's probably the right amount of sweetness. It has just a very little bit of olive oil. Olive oil is a fat, and so this recipe works with just a small amount, just 2 teaspoons. It's a healthy fat, but fat calories are kind of dense. A little bit goes a long way, and you just need enough to really moisten the cabbage. And then a little bit of freshly ground pepper. I always just eyeball the amount, and I like ground pepper, so I'm going to add a good amount here. It seems like a lot, but I'm actually adding it to this whole big salad, so I want all of the produce to get some of that. Okay, so simple dressing. Just going to use this fork to whisk it up a little bit. And the neat thing about the dressing too is once you've made this once or twice, you can play with how much sugar and salt tastes right to you. I would say start with less and you can always increase the amount. Even now, if I dressed this and I felt like it needed a little bit of salt, I could sprinkle a little bit in there. Try to get my added sugar and my black pepper in, and then I just have these nice big tongs or spoon and fork, salad spoon and fork, to give it a good toss and coat everything. A tip about this salad, I'm going to try a bite now and tell you how delicious it is because it really is my favorite. But if you leave it in the refrigerator overnight, it's even better the next day. So if you have a barbecue or cookout that you're going to and you want to bring this, try to prepare it a day in advance. All right, I'm going to serve a little bit up. Use that fork again. Try to get a little bite of everything. Really good, super crunchy and very refreshing, great for this time of year. Hope you enjoy.